When Dr. Davidson asked me to speak some time ago, he said, Art, this is a very sophisticated, knowledgeable audience. They know their way around the Capitol. They know a little bit about public policy making and how to get it done. And so I've heard your stories, some of your stories over the years, 30 years that I've been a patient of his. And he said, I think they would appreciate hearing some of those because the lessons that you've learned that you told me, although he had to learn a language that spoke, when I spoke with cotton in my mouth or something else, he understood them. And so I'm going to try to give you some inside insights of what it's like to be in various positions that I've held. I got a reminder, one of the most recent lessons, just yesterday when I was coming up here from San Francisco. I had to meet your staff to do a dry run of this ceremony, and so I was a little bit late as I was coming up from 80, and just before I got to the Yolo Causeway that a highway patrolman pulled me over because I was going a little too fast. Now, I have to tell you that I used to set the salaries for the highway patrol. And I figured, well, I've been around a little bit, and maybe he'll recognize me, but this young officer came up and asked for my driver's license and registration. And so I thought I'd give him a hint, because I don't like to just say, do you know who I am? All too often, people these days say, no, I don't. So I thought I'd give him a little hint. I said, you know, I used to work a lot with Governor Brown the first time he was up here. Kept on writing. Maybe he's a Republican. I said, I also worked with Governor Duke Majan when I was up here, and we got along very well. Didn't make any difference to him. He finished writing the ticket, handed it to me, and said, you know, Mr. Agnos, you seem to know a lot of important people, but you really got to get to know Jack Hawkins. Jack Hawkins? Who's he? He says, that's me. And he walked away. So you learn all the time. But being mayor of San Francisco was probably the hardest work I ever did in my life. And the difference between being a legislator or being a department head for the U.S. government as a presidential appointee, the difference being mayor is that issues come at you like heat-seeking missiles. And everywhere else, you can kind of duck if it's not your issue. But not with the mayor. It comes right at you, and there is no ducking. You have to deal with it. I got a reminder of that and a lesson my first year, almost when I took office. We were going through, back in 1988, a difficult time, as we are today in government. And so we were in what was then the worst recession since the Great Depression. Now we've been through that again. But back then, I was in the midst of that. And so I was doing the things that we're seeing in government today, which is cutting services, laying off workers, freezing wages for all the rest, raising some taxes. And it wasn't an easy way to start a mayoralty. As a matter of fact, I was at a reception for a new congressman at that time who was the son of Bobby Kennedy. His name was Joe Kennedy. He'd just been elected from Massachusetts to take his uncle's place, Ted Kennedy, who'd been elevated to the U.S. Senate. And because the Kennedys were very popular in California and especially in San Francisco, he was there to say thank you to the people who had helped him become a congressman. So we were at a reception toward that end, and we were lined up in the receiving line, and the new congressman was next to me, and his youngest sister, you know, the Kennedys had a lot, Bobby had a lot of kids, and his youngest sister, Rory, who was kind of a pepper pot, was right next to him. And so Joe was making small talk with me and said, gee, Mr. Mayor, you're having a tough time getting started here with this recession and all the issues you have to cut. And I said, yeah. I said, here I am in my first 6 months, and I'm laying off workers and cutting services, raising taxes, freezing wages. His sister was right next, overheard me saying that, and she said, you really doing all 4 of those things in your first 6 months? I said, yes, I have to. She looks at her brother and said, Joe, what the hell are we getting our picture taken with him for? And that's the way it goes. That's the way it goes. And I could talk all day about the lessons that I learned, but I want to drill down for the short time that I have before we get into the actual ceremonies. I want to talk a little bit about the bureaucracy, because I believe that in the modern era of government, with term limits and all the things we've seen as a result of it, I think that we've seen the rise of power in the bureaucracy, the regulators. And I think it's important for your organization, I know you have expert advice, to understand how to maneuver in the bureaucracy. But I find that a lot of people do not understand the mentality and the attitude of the bureaucracy. So I'm going to tell you a little bit of that because I do think it is an important subject. Now, I learned a lot as a mayor, dealing with 25,000 employees, as a presidential appointee with some 4,000 in the Department of HUD. And the big thing is that bureaucrats are in it for the long term. They're there for 30 years because they're working toward their pension, they're working in civil service, and they have a lifetime career, as opposed to today's politicians, for the most part, are in it for the short term because of term limits. They know they're going to be leaving in 4 to 6 years, at the most 8 in the state of California, and so their eyes are very often on what's coming next or the short-term issues and not the long-term issues. In my day, when we knew we could be here for 20 years, we did a lot of oversight. So we'd pass a law, and we could do for the next 4 to 6 to 8, 10 years the kind of oversight that refined it, improved it, and did the other kinds of things that make for good laws. So I'm going to tell you several stories today so you can comprehend, I hope, what bureaucracy and the bureaucrat is about. The first story is when I was appointed by the president to be the regional director of HUD, which was some 10 offices, almost 3,000 employees in California, Nevada, Hawaii, and what's the other one? Arizona. Almost had a Rick Perry moment there for a minute. Arizona. And I walked in to meet with the new program directors, the civil servant bureaucrats that run the various programs that I was appointed by the president to kind of oversee from his philosophy, with his philosophy. So I went into the meeting, and there were about a dozen of them from the 10 offices, and they said, "Mr. Agnos, we're very proud to have you here. You're really part of the A team." I said, "No, A team. Yeah, we're the B team." I said, no, we're all going to be one team in this administration. We're not going to have divisions. No, Mr. Agnos, you are a former mayor, you're a former legislator, you're appointed by the president. We've never had anybody as important as you are. You're really the A team. So I said, well, then what's the B team? They said, we be here when you come, and we be here when you go.